Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. I'm Laura Candler from Teaching Resources, and I have with me Peggy George and Francie Kugelman as moderators. I'm excited to be able to share with you strategies for using graphic organizers to create lessons based on Common Core reading standards. Don't worry if your school's not going to be using the Common Core standards, because these methods can be applied to other reading instruction as well. Now, let's take a look at the webinar objectives to get an overview of what we'll be covering in this session. In this webinar, it actually has two parts. In the first part, we're going to examine how to create effective reading lessons and mini lessons. And this part can be really applied to any reading lessons. And in the second part, we're going to learn how to pair graphic organizers with selected text and create Common Core reading lessons. So they'll be specific to the Common Core, especially for grades 2 through 6. Now, some of the ideas I'm sharing could be used at other levels, but the webinar is really targeted for those age groups. And you'll be sharing your own strategies, websites, and tips for using graphic organizers and reading instruction, and you can just do that throughout the webinar using the chat feature. And we will be saving the chat area separately as some kind of text document, or it may be a PDF, so that you'll be able to go back and review whatever's put in the chat. Before we begin, let me start by sharing a little background about how I came to develop the material for this webinar. Many of you know that I'm the creator of the Teaching Resources website, and I taught upper elementary school for 30 years, mostly 4th and 5th grade, before I retired in September of 2010. I've always loved using graphic organizers with my students, and I've been creating them and using them for ages. You can find them all over my website for free in my online file cabinet. It seems like I'm always creating some kind of graphic organizer for every lesson I do. I just love them. Anyways, a few years ago, when I was writing my book, Power Reading Workshop, I decided to include a chapter on graphic organizers because I just thought it was so important to the reading workshop approach. But that chapter became bigger and bigger, and I finally realized it really needed to be a book on its own. Power Reading Workshop is kind of like, it's a book about the reading workshop approach. It's kind of like the read to self and listen to reading parts of Daily 5. And like me, the teachers who use the strategies were reporting great results, great success, but they were also asking me how to create new mini lessons when they finished the step-by-step lessons that were in the book. About that time, people started really looking for resources for teaching the Common Core standards, and I guess I kind of had an aha moment, because I thought, wow, these graphic organizers are perfect for teaching Common Core standards. You could find a graphic organizer for every single standard at almost every upper elementary grade level. So I started digging into it a little more, and the book all came together, and it became graphic organizers for reading teaching tools aligned with the Common Core. Now, if you're new to my webinars, which it looks like a lot of you are, it looks like according to the poll 50% of you are, you might be sitting here thinking, oh my goodness, this is just going to be a sales pitch for her books. But I can tell you that that's not the kind of webinar I do. It would be impossible for me to teach a webinar without referring to the material that I've put together in my books, because the books are like really a part of who I am. But I am going to be sharing a lot of free information from the book, and I'm also going to give you a couple of free items, one of which is only available to people who watch the webinar. So right here is just a little view of some of the free things. There's a sampler pack that has actual graphic organizers you'll be able to use, and then there's some charts in the book that I'll be explaining later that are really neat, and they are not available anywhere else for free on the internet, but at the end of this session I'll be telling you where you can download both of those things. So anyways, let's get on to the meat of the session. As I said, there's two parts. Part one is on creating effective reading lessons. Now, it's really hard to teach a reading workshop or a reading webinar without having some material, so a common reference point, something that we can all refer to for the lesson. So I'm going to read to you part of one of my favorite stories, Goldilocks and the Three Librarians. Could you let me switch real quick the polling options, and because I would like to see let me do this real quick. I have changed the polling feature. If you look over to the left side, there's a little check mark. And if you click down below that, you can click either yes or no. Have you read Goldie Socks and the Three Librarians? Do you know this book and have you read it? And I'll give everybody a chance to tell me yes or no. And then I'm going to shoot those responses out. Okay. And it looks like the yes, no is 68% have not read this book. All right, so that's exciting. I always love sharing a book with people who haven't read it before, because if nothing else from this webinar, you can walk away and say, I learned a great new book to start off the school year. So this is an awesome book. And you might be sitting there thinking, is Laura allowed to do this, you know, with copyright issues and everything? But actually, the first time I tried to share this in a webinar, I tried to do it with video, and it really didn't work well at all. And so I emailed the author, Jackie Mims Hopkins, and I asked for permission to scan the pages of the book in to use in workshops and webinars. And she said that would be fine, but she just asked me to share her website. She does do author visits. She's also the author of Joe Bright and the Seven Genre Dudes, which is another great book. But anyway, so I do have permission to share this book with you. So let's move on and let me enjoy reading it to you. Now, I know the words are really hard for you to read, but I actually have a physical book that I'm reading from here. If you have sharp eyes, you might be able to do it, but you can enjoy the pictures while I read. Once upon a time, nestled deep in an enchanted forest, there lived a book-loving bear family. Papa Bear was a public librarian. Mama Bear was a school librarian, and their son Baby Bear was a librarian in training at the Grizzly Preschool. Now, I know that it makes you cringe to hear librarian, because we teach our kids to say librarian, and now it's not said correctly, but it is a cute play on words in this book. So hopefully we can put up with it just in this instance. One morning, a little girl named Goldie Socks was on her way to school. Goldie Socks usually walked along the road, but this day, since she was running particularly late, she decided to take a shortcut through the forest. By and by, Goldie Socks came upon an astonishing sight. There, in the middle of the forest, she saw a cottage that appeared to be made of books. Goldie Socks loved books more than bears love honey, so she went up to the house for a closer look. She knocked on the door, and to her surprise, it creaked open. Cautiously, Goldie Socks peeked inside. Shelves and shelves of wondrous books lined the walls. She called out to see if anyone was home, but no one answered. Goldie Socks knew she shouldn't go in, but the temptation of all those books was more than she could bear. Once inside the cottage, Goldie Socks went straight to the shelves and began browsing through the books. The first book she pulled off the shelf was too big. In fact, it was so heavy it fell on the floor. Goldie Socks went to another shelf, but the book she took from this shelf was too little. Then she looked through some nonfiction books and found one that was just right. Goldie Socks wandered over to another shelf and opened up a chapter book. She used the 5-finger rule to see if the book was too hard. She started with a closed fist. When she came to a word she couldn't read, she put one finger up. All 5 fingers went up while reading the first page of the book, so she knew that book was too hard for her. She tried another book, but it was too easy. Then she found a book of fairy tales that was just right. After she found several books that were just right for her, Goldie Socks began searching for the perfect place to read. Goldie Socks looked around the room and spotted a big Lazy Bear recliner. She climbed up in the enormous chair and pushed back, but it went back too far. Now, I know you guys would love it if I read the whole book, but I'm not going to read the whole book. It is awesome. It follows the same pattern with her trying to find the perfect spot to read. It has a wonderful ending, and I'm not going to give away the surprise, but it's just an awesome book for starting the year and explaining to kids about how to pick a good book. let's see. Let me move on to what to do with this book as far as using it as a basis for a reading lesson. If you're using approaches like the Daily 5 or a reading workshop approach, you may not be using a basal textbook with reading lessons, or you may have a basal textbook, but you may want to put together your own reading lessons from time to time. And when you do that, there's kind of a format. Certainly I didn't make it up. It's a format that I've seen around in several places. My colleague Pat Calfee, who teaches workshops with me, brought it to my attention as well, and I've seen it a number of other places. But there's a format for reading lessons that goes I do, we do, and you do, a 3-part lesson. The I do part of the lesson is the part where the teacher gives input, like reading the story or explaining a new strategy, using Think Aloud to model how to apply the strategy, or they demonstrate how to record their thinking on a class anchor chart or use a graphic organizer. The we do part of the lesson is the guided practice, and students either work with the teacher or work with other students interactively to practice the skill. So it could actually take place in a whole group setting or a small group setting, but the key is there's going to be some kind of interaction between the teacher and students, or between partners or cooperative learning groups. Usually it involves some kind of discussion or analysis. And then the final part is independent practice, the you do part. Students read independently and apply the new reading skill. And it could be a text that the teacher has assigned or maybe self-selected. And it also might involve written response like journal writing or completing a graphic organizer. Now, when you look at that whole framework, you might be sitting there thinking, how in the world could I get that into 20 minutes to make a mini lesson if I'm doing reading workshop? And you don't, I guess is the short answer. You don't have to get that into 20 minutes. A mini lesson doesn't mean to take a full lesson like this and then just speed through it and try to get it done in 20 minutes, because that would be impossible. And if you tried to do it, you'd do a very poor job and your kids would be frustrated. So let's take a look at how to take that effective reading lesson model and break it down into mini lessons. I'm going to give an example of how, actually I'm going to go through the, before I break it down into mini lessons, let's take a look at how you would do this lesson as a full lesson. Then we'll break it down into mini lessons. So let's say we were going to do a lesson on how to choose a just right book. And Goldie Shucks would be a perfect book for that. So in the I do part, you might start off by asking students how they choose books. Listen to what they have to say, and maybe not even bother to record ideas just at that point. But then read aloud Goldilocks and the Three Librarians. Then go back to the original question and record ideas for how to choose a just right book on a class anchor chart. Then for the we do part, the guided practice, you might give each team a stack of books that has a variety of different types of books and different levels, and then have students work with a partner, taking a book from the stack and using the 5-finger rule and explaining whether or not the book is just right. And then the independent part would be that students independently choose a book to read, and they explain either orally or in writing why they chose the book, and then they read their selected book independently. So that's a full lesson, and if you were to do that all in one day, that would probably, there really wouldn't be a lot of time for kids to do much reading, because that might take you 45 minutes to do that lesson. So if you want to take that full lesson and break it down into a mini lesson, it would look like this. The full lesson would have all 3 components taught in one day, and maybe 45 minutes to an hour. And the reading mini lesson might be to chunk that thing into 20-minute segments. So the I do might be one day, the we do, the you do, or some of those parts may take more than one day. So I'll give you just a second to sort of process that for a moment, and maybe, because I'm actually about to move into part 2, where I'll kind of take that and put it with graphic organizers and the Common Core and apply it in a little bit more detail. So let me just take a moment for you to look at that and think about if you have any comments related to it or any questions. Okay. I saw someone in the chat was mentioning the 5-finger rule. I was curious about how many of you have used the 5-finger rule with your students, and whether or not you have use it the way it's suggested here, or if you have other tips for using the 5-finger rule, or other tips for helping your kids find good books to read. Okay, we're going to move on to part 2 with creating Common Core lessons with graphic organizers. And so we're going to take the first part that's very general and kind of apply it to the Common Core. All right, this is a chance for you to be a little bit interactive here with me. I'm going to pose this question for you, and I'm going to give you 4 choices, and after I give you all 4 choices, you're going to use your interactive whiteboard tools and show me the answer. But hopefully the tools are still turned off right now because I don't want anybody to, to mark on the whiteboard until I'm finished. So what are your school's expectations for implementing the Reading Common Core State Standards? That's what CCSS stands for. And the first choice would be that you're just becoming familiar with it and kind of learning about it, but you're really not expected to use it this year. The next choice would be that your school or district is beginning to implement it, but not really seriously. You're expected to be doing something with it, but you're maybe not being evaluated on it. Implementing Common Core State Standards fully would be that you're expected to teach them all, and possibly even you're going to be evaluated on, your lesson plans. Do they include Common Core Standards? You're really just totally jumping into it. And then, of course, the last option that we have to have is none of this applies to you. Maybe you don't live in the United States, or maybe you're in one of the states that's not using Common Core Standards, or you don't teach in a public school. So that's where we are. Okay, Peggy, could you turn on the participant tools, and they can, what I just want them to do is in the area below each choice, just put a check mark or a star or a dot or something like that to indicate where your school system is, your district, and so on. That gives me a good idea of where we are in our understanding of Common Core. Okay, great. So we're really quite spread out all over the place, almost equal parts. Most people, I guess, look like they're in the area where they're beginning to implement, and actually quite a few are in implementing fully. So, and then there's quite a few that it does not apply to them at all. Okay, great. That's real helpful to me. And if you want to, in the chat box, if you want to actually type in any more details about your state or your school or whatever and what your expectations are, I'm sure other people are interested to hear some of that. And if we could get those tools turned back off before I move to the next slide, just let me know when we're ready to go. I'm seeing red bars next to my name and everybody else's. Do I sound like a chipmunk?
Laura, those red bars happen when people are using things interactively.
Oh.
So I think we'll be
good
to go when you move on.
All right. All right. So have you turned off the tools then?
Yes.
Thanks. All righty. So what I wanted to do for the first part of part 2 is I just wanted to give a brief overview of the way the Common Core reading standards are set up, especially that there are a lot of people who are on both ends, either just becoming familiar or they don't have to use them at all. So just for interest's sake, to know a little bit about them. The Common Core standards, at least as the ones I looked at from grades 2 through 6, there are anchor standards for reading. Now, the reading standards are a part of the English Language Arts standards. The English Language Arts standards include other things like writing, speaking and listening, language arts, and so on. The reading standards, actually there are 3 parts now. Literature, informational text, and foundational skills. It's kind of interesting that when I first started writing the graphic organizer book, they did not have foundational skills listed as as a reading standard. It was down there with the in the list with writing and listening and so on, and then it got moved. So I guess that's something I have to sort of tweak in the explanation later, because the graphic organizers part only deals with informational text and literature, and that's why I put the I and the L there. So the standards are divided into 4 sections, and all of the grade levels have these 4 sections, but when you dig into the standards for each grade level, the wording is slightly different, and you'll see that in a few minutes. But the anchor standards for the first part on key ideas and details are just things like reading closely to determine what the text says and to make inferences, to determine central ideas and themes of the text, to analyze how certain individuals act, and that kind of thing. All of the grade levels have wording that's similar to these 3 anchor standards, but it's modified for the grade level. Then the next 3 standards are dealing with craft and structure. And these are more interpretive things. Interpret words and phrases, figurative meanings, connotative meanings, and so on. Analyze the structure of text, looking at point of view and purpose and that type of thing. The next 3 anchor standards for informational text and literature are more of an integration thing. Integration of knowledge and ideas, integrate and evaluate content, and so on. So this is a higher level. And then the last standard for each of the grade levels, it has wording something like this, but it's for the grade level. Read and comprehend complex literary and informational texts independently and proficiently, and then it will usually say at a certain grade level. So that's kind of an outline of the anchor standards that I wanted to give an overview, because it's kind of meaningful for what we're about to do here in just a moment. The other thing I wanted to mention was that the way the Common Core separates the 2 types of text into literature and informational. And you know, in the past we've called this fiction and nonfiction. And I know at first when I saw it, and I'm sure other people, you know, we thought, why do they need to change these words? You know, we've called it fiction and nonfiction forever, so why do we need new terms? But fiction and nonfiction were very confusing terms, because some things like folk tales and poetry were actually nonfiction, but their structure was a lot more like fiction, and it was confusing to kids if you even bothered to let them know that poetry was considered nonfiction. A lot of teachers really didn't bring it up. So I really like these 2 categories a lot better. I feel like they explain the text, the types of text better, because it really deals with the types of text structures and things, and you'll see that in lessons. All right, so now let's take what I went over in the first part and talk about how you could develop a reading lesson with a graphic organizer, because there's really 4 easy steps. First thing is you're going to be choosing your reading standard, and that might be, you might have a timeline that your school system says, you know, you're supposed to implement in a certain standard at a certain time, but if not, you're going to be choosing either informational or literature. And then the next thing is you're going to be picking a text to go with it, informational or literature, and I've got 2 examples there. And then the third step is you want to think about how the text is organized and what the purpose of your reading standard is, the focus of that standard, and you want to pick a graphic organizer that's going to fit that reading standard. And in the graphic organizers for reading book, I broke the graphic organizers down into a couple of categories. There's actually a whole chapter on what I call multi-purpose graphic organizers that are just basic things like T-charts and Venn diagrams and multi-column charts, attribute charts. They're just, anybody can just draw one out. And each one of those has a specific purpose. And when you get to know their purpose, like a Venn diagram is for compare and contrast, then it's very easy to match it with the standard and find the right graphic organizer. And then also we have 2D flat graphic organizers and 3D folded graphic organizers, which many of us call foldables. The term foldable is probably trademarked, and I just called them 3D folded graphic organizers for that reason. And most of you are familiar with those. But you're going to choose your graphic organizer. And then the 4th step is you're going to take what we talked about in the first part, and you're going to create a reading lesson or a mini lesson following that I do, we do, and you do model. So let's take a look at a sample 4th grade lesson. Step 1, choose a reading standard, and I just picked a literature one because I'm going to use the Goldilocks book. RL, Reading Literature, 4.3 says to describe in depth a character, setting, or event in a story or drama, drawing on specific details in the text. For example, characters' thoughts, words, or actions. So step 2 is to choose the text, and I picked the Goldilocks text. The next step is to pick a graphic organizer that will go with it, and this chart here is actually taken from the book, and it shows all the multi-purpose ones. And I'm going to show you another selection of graphic organizers in another part of the book is dealing with informational text and literature, and those are your specific graphic organizers that are drawn for a specific thing like a character trait map or whatever. But I'm going to go back. Oh, let me show you this real quick. One thing that I told you at the beginning of the session that I would be giving to you as a free item at the end of the webinar is the book has charts for the Common Core standards for all of the reading informational text and literature standards for grades 2 through 6. And I went through, I actually had some help doing this. I had teachers at each grade level helping me determine what would be a good choice of a graphic organizer to use for each one of those standards. So in, I think it's part 2 of the book, somewhere near the front, it has these charts, and you can just look for your standard. So right here it has RL 4.3 about character, setting, or event and story. It lists a folded flapper as an example of a graphic organizer. And so that's actually the one that I want to use for this lesson. So in step 4, when you create the 4th grade lesson, this lesson has 5 parts to it. It's 5 little mini lessons that you could do. So taking the Common Core standard and adding the graphic organizer. Teacher input would be reading Goldilocks and the 3 Librarians, asking students to brainstorm character traits, and then actually demonstrating how to create that folded graphic organizer. Step 4, but mini lesson 2 would be that guided practice part where the kids are creating their folded flappers along with you, and you're working together to review the list of brainstorm character traits and write 1 character trait on the first flap, and then you open the flap and you work as a class to discuss and list supporting details from the story under the first flap. And then the we do part is that the kids are going to work with a partner to complete the 2nd and 3rd flaps. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, okay, that sounds pretty good. I think the kids would be ready to do that. They'd be ready for the you do part on the 3rd day. But I want you to go back and look at the standard for a minute, because this is the thing about the Common Core standards that really caught my eye when I was looking at them. I realized that if we just try to take a graphic organizer and use it in a simple way like I just showed you in the first 2 lessons, that's not really meeting the needs of that or achieving that standard. Look at the standard again. It says to describe in depth a character, setting, or event in a story or drama. And just listing details on a graphic organizer is not describing in depth the character, setting, or the event in the story or drama. So we really haven't done enough with this standard by just using the graphic organizer. So that's where the 3rd day we need to do even more guided practice. And on the 3rd day, we're going to be demonstrating how to write sentences about Goldilocks based on all the things that are listed there. And then the students can work with their partner to create sentences to continue that paragraph with 2 sentences for each character trait on the flap. So it's really not enough to just do a short lesson with a graphic organizer. You're going to have to take it to another level to meet those Common Core standards. Then on the 4th day, the kids could do independent practice. They could create their own flappers, independently read a short book or selection that has a strong main character, and they would start by choosing their 3 character traits. And on the 5th day, they would complete their graphic organizer, and on their own they would actually write a half-page analysis of the character based on the details. So as you can see, let me just do a little recap on this lesson. That's a whole week's worth of mini lessons. And so this would be 20 minutes at the beginning of each class period, and then the remaining time could be used for your reading workshop approach or other strategies. And I just put Monday through Friday. It would not have to be Monday through Friday, but I was just trying to give you an outline of how you could use the graphic organizers to, it's really easy. You take that standard and you take a book and you find a graphic organizer, you put it all together, and after you get a little practice with it, it's pretty easy to do. Now I have to thank Peggy and Francie for this part of the presentation, because I really neglected to get into informational text. And Francie let me know pretty quickly, Laura, people are looking for stuff on informational text. And I assume that's true. Let me just stop talking for a moment and take a look at what's going on in the chat here. Where are you and where's your school system in terms of informational text? Like, what kinds of questions do you have about it, and are you already using it a lot? Because it is very big on the Common Core. It was big in North Carolina, so I guess I'm used to doing Common Core. I don't know if this is a change for you. Most teachers are much more comfortable with literature. Okay, I'm just kind of scanning through here for a second. Okay, great. So a couple of questions that Francie brought to my attention were, people want to know where you can find informational text to use with your students, and also how can you create informational text reading lessons with graphic organizers. So just a quick overview of some places I've found them. There's a lot of really good little trade books for kids. I love Scholastic book club magazines, and they always have the greatest little trade books on hurricanes and tornadoes and robots and all kinds of things, and I would save up my Scholastic bonus points and buy those for my classroom. The Reading Basal Text usually has some pretty interesting nonfiction informational text selections. You can use your social studies, science, and health textbook to do some integration. How many of you guys integrate science, health, and social studies into literacy to try to use your informational text that way? Yeah, I see a lot of yes. And student magazines like Scholastic News, which I love and now has an online component. I just think it's an awesome magazine. I've used it for years. And there are websites out, like I found sciencenewsforkids.org, that has great articles. It's upper elementary, middle school-ish. It's really, the article's a little too hard for younger kids, but I know there are other good websites out there. So there's really a lot of sources of informational text if you look for them. Now, to answer the question about how you create informational text reading lessons with graphic organizers, I don't have time to read you another book and go through a whole lesson, and I would probably bore you if I did. So Francie suggested that I show you a little peek into the graphic organizer book, because the work is already done for you there. So the graphic organizers book comes in a print version. It also comes in digital. You can buy the digital by itself. And what I love about it is my publisher came up with the idea of having these hyperlinks that go through the text, and you can click from one place to another. And I'm going to sort of show you how that works in a minute, but it's really neat for the digital version. And in the graphic organizer book, they also worked with me on enlarging some of the graphic organizers in the ones that were not in the print book, because in the print book you have to leave margins for binding the book, but in a digital book you don't have to do that. And we made sure that the page numbers match in both versions to make it less confusing, and then we decided to throw in the digital one for free if you buy the print one from Teaching Resources. If you buy it somewhere like Amazon, you won't get the digital one free. It is on Amazon, but I'll tell you where to get it in a minute if you're interested. Anyways, let me show you a little quick peek into the book. This is a snapshot of the first page of the table of contents, and you notice that there are little blue words. And if you click on any of those blue words, it takes you right to the page number. So let's say that I wanted to look under Chapter 1, I wanted to look at the Common Core Standard Chart for Grade 3. So if I click on Grade 3, it brings me to this page. And you can see the tab at the top says 3rd grade literature. But what I really want is 3rd grade informational text. So I'm going to click over one more page. And I might be thinking, okay, I think I want to do something on main idea. I need to work with main idea. What would be a graphic organizer for that? And there's one right there. It's called Main Idea Neighborhood. And when you click on that link, it takes you straight to the page that has the lesson on how to teach the main idea neighborhood. And if you notice at the top of the page, it has the Common Core standards for all the grades 2nd through 6th that would be dealing with main idea. It has suggested text for you. It has a little snapshot of the graphic organizer, and then it has a step-by-step lesson that you can use. And then if you go to the next page, you actually see the graphic organizer. And this one is kind of neat because I conceived of the idea of the main idea being taught with the neighborhood being like the topic, and the main idea sentence being like a street, and the supporting details being like houses on the street. And it really helps the kids understand, you know, how things go together, because I remember with my students, they used to get confused between the topic, the main idea sentence, and the supporting detail. So this is a graphic organizer that you could use over and over again. So anyways, there's, I guess, the simple answer on how to create informational text lessons. You're going to apply the same I do, we do, you do strategy as was referenced earlier. Okay, well, that actually brings us to the end of the webinar content, which is going to leave us lots of time for questions. But let's just look back over real quickly to see if we accomplished what we set out to do. We were going to examine how to create effective reading lessons and mini lessons, and we did that. And we learned how to pair graphic organizers with literary and informational texts to create lessons for the Common Core reading standards. And you shared strategies, websites, and tips, which I can't wait to read later because the chat's been flying by the whole time, and I have not been able to stop and read it, or I would get completely distracted. So I'm seeing some questions about where do you get the goodies that I promised you, so let me move on to that part. But before I do, I just want to share with you a little closing thought on the webinar content. I've always loved this quote: reading is to the mind what exercise is to the body. And I think with graphic organizers, it's a really good way to help kids exercise their minds when they read. And just like with the body, if we don't read, we won't be exercising our minds. So I love that quote. Okay, let's talk about some additional resources. If you're not signed up for my newsletter, you actually will be signed up soon, because when you registered for this webinar, there was something that said that you would be signing up for the newsletter. So I'll be adding your names to my system, and you'll get one on Saturday. I send one out almost every week. And that's a great resource for you, a lot of free materials. And then this handouts is in a zip file, lauracandler.com/free/GOwebinar.zip, because it's a zip file. Now that is not going to be published anywhere. That link, I'm not even going to be sending that out to you in an email. It's just for people who've watched the webinar. So I'll leave that up there for a moment for you to get it. It's also in the chat, but I mean, if you need to open a browser window and go there, that's fine. You know, it'll download as a file, and then you have to find it and then open it up later. Okay, let's keep going though. We're going to do a drawing for the graphic organizer book, or you can win Power Reading Workshop, one or the other. If you already have one, you can get the other one. And what I'm going to do is, I already have drawn the names. I drew them right before the session started, so if you hear your name called, you've got to type in the box, I won. And I'm really, really hoping that you log in under your own name, because that's how we'll know if you won, and I can match it with your email address later. And then I'm going to wait a few seconds, and then if no one responds, I'll choose another winner. And then after the webinar is over, if you win, please email me right away and let me know which of the two books that you want. And if you aren't a winner, I do have a discount code available, and I'll tell you where you can go to use that to get the books off. 25% off if you use the discount code GOFR, Graphic Organizers for Reading. So anyways, the first name that came up, I drew 5 names out. So I'll start with the first name, was Christy Sheffield. Christy Sheffield. I'm going to type that into the box and give Christy time, and if Christy is in the room, I'll give her a minute. If she's there, she needs to say, it's me, I won. Okay, sounds like Christy is not here. Okay. Christy didn't win if she, okay, she's not in the room, so let's go on. All right, the next person who is on my list is Kelly Armstrong. Is Kelly Armstrong in the room? Kelly Armstrong. Oh, Krista says, sorry, it's Kelly, not Krista. Kelly Armstrong. No Kelly. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, it's, wait a minute. Did somebody say she's there? Oh, Kelly did say I'm there. I was so glad I didn't call out the next person's name. All right, that would be a disaster. Okay, so Kelly Armstrong, I saw her name, and she says I'm here. So Kelly Armstrong is our winner, and she can let us know, let me know later which one she wants, or if she wants to go ahead and type it in here which book she wants, and I can make sure I'll get in touch with her because I have her email address. Okay. So where you can go to get that book, if you go to www.goforreading.com, that brings you to the graphic organizer page. Or if you, let me talk about the certificate, and that will answer your questions too, because I got that coming up. So in just a moment, I'm going to tell you how you can download that certificate of attendance. And in the meantime, I just want to make sure you see these links. If you're not on my Facebook page, please connect with me there, facebook.com teaching resources. I really enjoy interacting with people there. I do have a blog, corkboardconnections.com, that I give more details. My website has a lot of information, a lot of files. There's not a lot of directions there, and my Corkboard Connections blog has more information about the things that I post. All right, let's talk about how to get the attendance certificate. And you can also get the graphic organizer book on that page. First of all, when you log off, there's going to be a survey that pops up. It is an automatic survey from Classroom 2.0 Live. Do not complete the survey. It's not meaningful for me. That's something for Classroom 2.0 Live. What you need to do is you need to visit the webinar attendance page. I'm going to give that to you in just a second when I go to the next screen. And when you click on the link, actually you won't be able to click on it here, but it will be put in the chat in just a second. You're going to go to a page that has a blue download button. You can add it to your shopping cart. It's free. The attendance certificate is free. And you just go through the checkout process, download the file, add your name to the form field, and print the certificate. Now, if you also want to purchase anything, while that's in your cart, you can go make a purchase. I'm going to leave the certificate live the rest of the evening. I don't want anybody to feel any pressure, they got to go do that right this second or anything. So here's the page. If you go to lauracandler.com/webinars/attendance.php, you're going to see a page that looks like this, and then you can click, and you kind of have to go through the checkout process. It's like you're buying it, but it's free. And then on the same page, there's graphic organizers for reading if you're interested in purchasing that. And that 25% off discount code is actually good for anything that you buy on my site, as long as the total in your cart is more than $19, because that's the cost of the digital book is $19.95, so I put that as the minimum. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is I do want to wrap up again by saying thanks to Classroom 2.0 Live, and Peggy on the right side there is one of the moderators for this evening. And Peggy, before we get to the questions and answers, could you take the microphone and just tell them a little bit about Classroom 2.0 Live, because I know these people would love to get involved with it.
Absolutely. I would love to do that. Classroom 2.0 Live is a weekly webinar that we hold every Saturday, except for the month of July and holidays. Right now we're on a little break because we're all volunteers and we needed a little break from the show. But it's a fantastic opportunity to get together in a Blackboard Collaborate webinar, so you're all pros now because you've been in this session and you know how it works. We use the same site for this, and we have different guests every week. Sometimes they're featured teachers, and all of it focuses on using technology in your classroom. So we may have teachers from primary grades, intermediate grades, special education, high school, even college who come on and share how they're using technology in their classrooms. We also invite guests like the people who created some of the fabulous tools we use. Things like Evernote and like VoiceThread, and there are just so many of them. We had a fabulous session on Symbaloo, if any of you have used that.
Peggy,
and we
Peggy,
record all of our... Yes?
I am so sorry to cut in on you, but the certificate thing is not working. I did raise my hand. I don't know if you heard it, but if you will keep telling them about...
I was in the middle of explaining.
I know. Yeah, I'm sorry, Peggy. If you will just keep talking to him about this, I'm going to go over and figure out what is going on with the shopping cart and why that thing won't work, okay? I need to let people know because they kept telling me in the chat that it's not working, so thank you.
Thank you for letting us all know. I'm sure she'll get it working in no time. So at any rate, there are lots of great tools you can learn about by coming to the Saturday webinars. They are at 12 noon Eastern Time, and the link is right there on this slide, live.classroom20.com. And we do record them, and we also post them on iTunes U, so you can watch them while you're exercising if you'd like to do that. So we'd love to have you join us and learn right along with us. And with that being said, I'm going to assume that Laura is still out working on the shopping cart issue, and I'm sure that Francie will be reposting the link for the free resources. I've been collecting some of the questions you've been asking, and when Laura comes back, I'll wait till she comes back to ask them for you. But if you have questions that don't have to do with how to get the books, but maybe things related to how to use graphic organizers in your mini reading workshops, could you repost your questions right here at the end of the chat, and then we'll be sure to catch them. And then when Laura comes on, we'll ask her those. But while she's working on that, I know a number of you were asking, how can we save these slides? So here's your repeat of that lesson. What you do is go up under the word File in your menu bar, select Save and Whiteboard. And when you select Whiteboard, you're going to say All Pages. And you say OK, and then there's a place there that asks you about file format. Make sure you save it as PDF, or you're going to have trouble opening it and reading it later. So if you save it as PDF, you'll be able to see all of the slides that she used. But we're also recording this, and all of this will be available for you. We'll be posting the chat log, and we'll be posting the actual recording with the links. So you can see the entire chat log, just like you're seeing it right now. You'll be able to see all of this when you replay it, and Laura will post those on her website. So, are you back, Laura?
Well, I kind of have bad news. Not terrible, terrible news, but I don't know if it's going to be an easy fix. I think I might have to go open up my my website to get it working, because it must be that the code on the page is wrong. So the only thing I can say is I want to do the question and answer session, and as soon as I'm done with answering questions, then the problem is I can't do two things at one time, that complex. When I'm done with this session, that will be my first task, is I will go fix that problem, and people will just, I will leave that link up until, definitely through the night, and the recording won't go out till tomorrow anyway, so there's really no harm in leaving it. But I want to answer questions first, and then I have to go look into what the situation. I actually tested it out the other day, and I was able to download. It's worked just fine, but something's wrong with the link there. So anyways, just be patient with me. But okay, what are the questions? Let's go ahead with the questions. And
Okay. There weren't a whole lot of questions, and as you can imagine, the chat was flowing by so fast. I am sure that I may have missed some, but there were a lot of questions about how to save the whiteboard slides, and so I've already answered that while you were away working on your site.
All right.
Melissa would like to know if you happen to have a lesson plan template that works well with Reading Workshop and the new Common Core standards.
I think the answer to that is, if you look, I guess my best way to refer somebody would be in the book Power Reading Workshop. There's the whole framework for teaching Reading Workshop, and there's actually like a lesson plan template for kind of how to do that. And there's step-by-step lessons for introducing Reading Workshop. But then after you kind of run out of the lessons that are in Power Reading Workshop, you would use what I shared this evening about the graphic organizers, and you would just pull your standards and you would pair it with a graphic organizer from the book to make up that reading mini lesson. So it might take you the first month of school teaching mini lessons on how to get Reading Workshop started, but once you had all that in place, you have your conferring with students, and you have all of that in place, then you're kind of like, okay, I need to get into my Common Core standards. How do I do that? Well, instead of teaching your lessons about how to get Reading Workshop going, you're going to be turning to what I shared this evening and the graphic organizer material. Take a standard, take a graphic organizer, find a piece of literature that goes with it, and create your plans that way. So I don't know if that was helpful or not, but I think the two together meet the Common Core when you look at both pieces together. The Reading Workshop and the graphic organizers can kind of fill the gaps. Okay? Someone was asking me in the chat whether I was going to send out an email.
I think that was a great answer, Laura.
Okay.
And there were a number of questions.
Yeah, it looks like we've got a lag here again. I see all these yellow bars.
We've got a lag again.
we sound chipmunky, don't we?
Yes. There were a number of questions that related to that same question.
And I see somebody's asked
Laura,
about...
Angie would like to know...
I'll wait.
There's a huge lag, so wait for me to finish asking my question and then start talking, okay? And Angie would like to know if you have a rubric you use to assess work on graphic organizers, or do you usually tie it to a writing?
I don't have a rubric. I guess you would have to have, it's a really good thought. I don't know whether you'd need a specific rubric for each different graphic organizer. I really didn't get that detailed, I don't think, with my assessment of the graphic organizer. It was just more of a holistic approach, I guess, to whether they had the details on it and the depth of their thinking and that kind of thing. But a lot of times graphic organizers are just your springboard for your ideas for your written work. So I may not even assess the graphic organizer that much. I might be assessing it as a part of the writing assignment. Yes, I want to see that you did one, but if you could write a great character analysis and maybe your graphic organizer was a little sparse on details. Some kids are like that. One of my daughters is like that. She'll write something and then she'll go back and do the plans to give to the teacher. But she did the writing first. So anyways, hopefully that addresses it, but I haven't thought about rubrics.
I think it does, and there were a number of questions related to grading using the graphic organizers.
Right.
Do you think rubrics are the best way to grade a graphic organizer?
Well, I love rubrics, and I think rubrics are the best way to grade a piece of writing or a writing assignment as a whole. But I see graphic organizers as being more like brainstorming tools or tools to organize your thinking. And to me, that would be like grading somebody's rough draft. And so I just really didn't, sometimes I might put a grade, a very subjective grade, just a kind of a completion grade on the graphic organizer. But if I really want to give it a serious grade, I'm going to grade it as it's connected with the piece of writing that came as a result of it.
That makes a lot of sense. There was another really interesting question that I'd love to hear you answer, and Becky wanted to know, can you use these digital graphic organizers from your work on the smartboard with students so they can interact with them in class?
Well, the interacting part is maybe, they're not like interactive, but yes, I mean, the really neat thing about the digital ones is you can project them on a smartboard. And in Adobe, you can rotate the files. I know I can do it in Adobe Pro. I don't know whether you can do it in a regular Adobe or not, because the ones that are landscape format, you would want to rotate them. Does anybody know if you can rotate them in regular Adobe without having the Pro version? Because if not, it might be worth trying to create a separate file. Okay, a lot of people say yes, you can. Because if you just rotate, like even the main idea graphic organizer that I showed you, I actually rotated that and turned it so you could see it. So you would want to do that on those pages. But yeah, that's a great thing. Like the kids can have it on their desk. And that's a neat reason to get like the digital and the print combination together, because you can have the print book at home, you can have the digital one on a flash drive or whatever and bring it in, use it, and show it to the kids and print out the pages. And Ginger Smith says use a document camera. You can do that too. I couldn't teach without a document camera anymore.
That is so true. Both are such valuable tools. Another participant wanted to know if you actually use the graphic organizer to guide your instruction. Is that the place you start?
Well, I start with the standard. Like now it's Common Core standards, but when I was in the classroom, it was just our reading objective, our reading skill or whatever. So I start there. So if I'm looking at something and like for instance with the Goldilocks book, I looked at the character trait analysis standard, and so I didn't start with a graphic organizer. I started with a standard, and I said, okay, I'm going to need to look at the character. I'm going to want to have the kids come up with 3 character traits for Goldilocks that can be supported with details from the text. Originally I looked at it and I was thinking, do the characters' words, thoughts, and actions, and then I thought, wait a minute, with Goldilocks, you don't know her thoughts and you don't know her words, all you know is her actions. So I realized that really wouldn't make an effective graphic organizer, so I said, well, we'll just do 3 different character traits. So really you start with a standard and you think about, is it compare and contrast? Is it, what exactly is it? And then that will take you to a better understanding of which graphic organizer you need to choose. And like I said, you've got the graphic organizer pack that I've given you, and hopefully somebody's downloaded and that works okay. And there are all of the charts, and yes, some of the charts refer to some of the things refer to things in the book, but there's a lot of things like Venn diagrams, attribute charts, T-charts that anybody can draw. So I guess you start with a standard first.
I think that just makes good sense as a teacher to begin with the standards. Just like they tell us, don't start with the technology tool, or don't start with the, kind of look to what with the end in mind, what you want to do, and then work backwards from that. So you want to know the outcome.
I just saw a comment, somebody, and it's gone now, so I don't remember who it was, said they were having trouble finding books to go with the standards. That is definitely, I experienced that myself when I was writing the graphic organizer book, and I actually did come up with 2 suggestions for the different lessons. I had different book choices. But one thing is, I think we should get away from thinking about books in particular, especially with informational text, and think about websites and think about those other resources that I listed earlier. There's so many other types of informational text, like Scholastic News. I used that in my classroom. Every issue that came out, we really dug into it and used a lot for informational text. So. Any more questions?
And I think that mostly covers the ones I was able to capture, but maybe Francie has captured some that I may have missed. Francie, do you have any?
No, I think we hit most of them. People really want to download certificates and buy books, so we got to kick Laura off so they want me to
can fix her page.
Okay, so let me respond, because there was a question about am I going to email and so on. I would suggest that as soon as I log off of here, my program for my website is on my other computer. So I'm going to go to a different computer, I'm going to pull it up, I will be able to correct the problem. What I suggest that you do is come back to your computer in an hour or whatever, refresh the page. You can spend the time. I've got tons and tons and tons of free resources all over my website. So you can check out all the things on my website and then just keep coming back to that page. Make sure you save it for yourself, because I'm not going to be sending it out again, and I probably won't email about it either, because this is for the people who watched the webinar. There was 1,000 people that signed up, but 1,000 people didn't show up. When they watched the webinar, well, they won't be able to get the certificate anyways, because that page will be deactivated. So anyways, somebody asked when's the next webinar or seminar. I don't have anything planned right now, but I do have maybe like 6 or 8 of them. If you go to my webinars page, just go to lauracandler.com and look under workshops and go to the free webinars link. And there's the one from Donors Choose that Francie did with me. There's one on reading workshop that's really all about the power reading workshop approach. There's one on daily math problem solving. There's one on literature circles, and they're all about this same sort of thing. We're interacting, and I share some things, and then I answer questions at the end. So someone said, when is this one going to be available on the site? Well, Peggy has to do the behind-the-scenes work on getting it transferred over to an MP4 file, and so sometime tomorrow it will go up. And there's one more question about where's the link for the certificate. So let's put that in there one more time and make sure that everybody has the link.
Laura?
So that they can, do you have that?
I've been posting. I'll post it again, but
post it one more time before I log off.
Explain how to make a quick copy of the text box. I know there's different ways to get it, but I like to copy it before I sign out. So Peggy, can you explain that?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Sure. I already explained how to save the whiteboard, and it's exactly the same process for saving the chat. It's important with the chat that you save it at the very end, because you have to re-save it, and it doesn't just save over the top of it. But you go up to File, you go down to Save, and then Save Chat, and it will ask you to type in a name for what you're saving it as, and make sure you pay attention to where you're saving it so you can find it again when it is downloaded. And the other thing that's a great tip to know about is when you watch the full Blackboard Collaborate recording, you can also save the slides and save the chat. But you do have to do it either before you log out or when you get the recording link and watch it again, and then you could do it at that point. So there's 2 great ways to save the content, and Laura will be posting it all on her website.
And I still keep saying questions in there about the certificate doesn't work. So I don't know if people have like stepped away from their computers or what's going on here, but the certificate doesn't work. As soon as I get off of the webinar, I will go to my website program and I will correct that problem. So I'm going to sign off. I've really enjoyed it. I know I'm going to look forward to going through, seeing the comments that you've written. Thanks everybody for attending. It's really wonderful to have the opportunity to share this with you. I enjoyed it a lot, and I promise I will go right to my other computer and take care of that problem. Bye-bye, everybody.